Judeo-Christian doctrine is not a scientific hypothesis. The people who came up with the stories weren't scientists 3,000 years ago. It's not a scientific theory. What is it? It's a story. We see the world through a story.
Yeah.
We inhabit a story. What's the story? The principle of voluntary self-sacrifice reflects the fundamental spirit of being itself.
Why can't it be a story and there be no historical Jesus? Like, why can't it just be a made-up story that's really helpful?
The simplest explanation for Christ involves his historicity. I think that's just a non-starter. It's just simplest to assume that he existed. Partly, too, because the gospel story is insanely complicated. It's insanely... I'll tell you a story. Okay. You tell me if you think someone could have thought this up.
All right.
Okay. When Moses is leading the Israelites through the desert, near the end of the story, they get all bitchy and whiny and pining for the tyranny and complaining about Moses and faithless about God and hopeless about the promised land. And, they're a whiny pack of slavish hedonists.
Okay.
And so they have a little fit like they always do. Yeah. And God's pretty tired of their bitching and whining. And so he sends a bunch of poisonous snakes in there to bite them. And you think, well, that's a hell of a thing for a good God to do.
If I did that to my kids, that'd be...
Yeah, well, it's like, no, it's absolutely straightforward. If you're in a rough situation and you start pining for the tyranny and calling yourself a victim and bitching about everything and losing your faith in forward movement, things are going to get a hell of a lot worse. Right. So that's the snakes. So you can blame that on God if you want, but that's not very smart. So it's like, if you weren't such a, slavish weasel, ungrateful weasel, the snakes wouldn't be there. Okay, so the Israelites are getting bitten up pretty good. And, they get a little bit on the repenting side, but mostly it's just pragmatism. And they go to Moses and they say, well, we hear you've got a pipeline to God. And, there's a lot of snakes and we're not very happy about that. And so maybe you could ask God if he just call off the snakes. And Moses says, I'll see what I can do. And so he goes and has a chat with God. And God says, yeah, I don't think I'll call those snakes off. Although I could, because
I'm God.
Well, I put them there.
I could totally do.
And you could imagine a story where the Israelites repent. Yeah. They go to Moses. Moses has a chat with God and the snakes go away. Right. That's not what happens. Right. Something really weird happens instead. It's really weird. God says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take all the bronze that the Israelites have with them and I want you to cast a staff. Yeah. Okay, now that's the staff of Moses' tradition, right? That's the staff that turns into the serpent that devours all other serpents. Yeah. That's the pole at the center of the world. That's the cosmic axis that unites earth and heaven. It's all of that. It's the tree of life, right? It's all of that. Make a staff. That's the staff Moses wields. That's what gives him his authority, right? That's the crook that guides the sheep, right? It's the magic wand of the wizard. It's all of that. It's the pole that the serpent of Asclepius wraps itself around. It's the symbol of healing itself, right? It's all of that. This is no trivial story. Make a staff of bronze, wrap a serpent around it, and then bring all the Israelites to look at it. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, we know what that means from a psychotherapeutic perspective. Yeah. It's a pharmacon. A little of the poison that kills you will redeem you. Look upon that which you fear and grow. Right? That's the definition of growth. That's how you learn. You go out on the edge and you look at something poisonous and you get stronger. Right? And so God thinks, well, I'm not going to get rid of the snakes, but I'll make the Israelites stronger. And you asked why we have a challenge in front of it. It's like, we're here to become stronger. We're not here to be protected. And you get stronger in proportion to your willingness to look at what terrifies you. Okay, so that's fine. So the Israelites go look at the serpent and the snakes can't poison them. So that's cool, but that's not what's really cool, although that's enough. That's Asclepius. Like, that's a major league bringing together of ideas, a massive bringing together of ideas. It's deep beyond anything I've ever seen represented in the literary realm. And so you can say, well, that's the opium of the people or the figment of the imagination. It's like, yeah, you come up with something like that. Just try it. Like that. You defy Shakespeare himself to manage that. right? Even Milton, it's deep. That's not the end of it. Christ says to his followers that people cannot be redeemed unless he's lifted up like the serpent in the desert. Okay, it's like, what the hell does that mean? It's 3,000 years later, and Christ is comparing himself to a serpent on a pole in the desert? Well, there's a crucifixion motif there, obviously. Okay, so what does it mean? You look upon what poisons you voluntarily. That's what cures you. Okay, what poisons you? Here's what poisons you. Threatened birth, right? The religious hypocrites, the scribes, the lawyers, the mob, the betrayers, right? The iniquity of your friends, right? The most painful possible death, right? Young, undeserved, to the most innocent, right? In front of his mother, right? Even though everyone knows he's innocent. Not only innocent, but positively good, right? And then that's not all, because there's the harrowing of hell as well. Well, that's the full serpent with all of its possible heads, right? And that's the equation. And the fact that the crucifix is at the center of our culture is us gazing on the ultimate serpent, exactly that, in the hopes of redemption. And you tell me how that came together.
Yeah.
You tell me. Because that's what that story means.